Alright, so I thought about whether I was going to do a script for this. I'm just going to go off the cuff, see how it goes. So, let's see. Stop killing games. On the surface, it's primarily trying to achieve one goal. Games preservation. So, when you buy a game, can you still play it a decade, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? Can you still play the game you purchased? Ideally, the answer should be yes. And for games that are online only, ideally those games should have an end-of-life plan. So basically, when the developer says, we don't want to host servers for this anymore, or we can no longer afford to host servers for this game anymore, or what have you, when that game company shutters down services for that game can still be played by the community by allowing that community to take over that overhead of hosting servers or whatever else. Or just some way to continue playing the game. Doesn't have to be a one-to-one how it used to be, just that if that person comes to play that game many years down the road, they have some form of interacting with that game. And generally, I'm in support of this concept of, I paid money for a thing, I should be able to continue to enjoy this thing later down the line. And for a lot of games, this is generally the case. But for a lot of online games that are online only, all your data, your save, everything is up in the cloud, it's not as much of a guarantee anymore. You could buy a game for $60. In Canada, games are like close to $100. You could spend $100 on a game, and a year from now, that game could shutter. And you don't really have a way to continue playing it, depending on what the development studio decides to do when they shut that game down. Whether they decide to make it playable offline or what have you is up in the air. And the money that you have put into that game, well, you gotta treat it as volatile. So, what's my background? I've been doing freelance game development and have worked for an actual corporate company as well. I have done freelance projects on a lot of network-based games, web games, and I worked on building industrial virtual reality applications. And I'm still kind of on that realm right now where I build industrial VR applications and VR hardware and all that stuff. So, but let's go to my experience doing network programming and what challenges something like Stop Killing Games could pose to me in the context of a network programmer, someone who programs like netcode for gameplay, and what kind of blockades or obstacles would having an end-of-life plan pose to me trying to make an online game. So I could give the straight answer, or the short answer. The answer is, it would not affect me one bit. If I have to make an end-of-life plan for a game that I am working on that has multiplayer support, the overhead to do that is not very high. And let me explain why. Most independent developers are going to be using a plethora of different APIs or services for doing their online stuff, just because it makes it easier. And the concept that an online game is going to struggle to be switched to an offline game, there's going to be some nuances, but typically just every online API that I've used in a game project Photon, Unet, Mirror, all these different technologies for making an online experience. There's a little poorly kept secret. You can debug your online code offline on localhost. So what does that mean? You do not explicitly need a server while testing your game code while you're writing your netcode. Your netcode that you have written does not require a dedicated online server all the time. You can just test your code locally without an internet connection. Your computer or the game client that you're working on will just pretend that it is online when it is in fact offline. This is going to be the case for most independent developers making an independently created game. They are going to take something off the shelf, and these off-the-shelf online infrastructures or ecosystems, they support offline debugging. So, how do you activate offline debugging? You click, often cases, let's say you're in Unity, there will be a Boolean option to, and for people who don't know, a Boolean is basically just saying true or false. This is either on or off, so they usually have a checkbox. You click that checkbox and it's either, yes, we're going to connect to the online service while debugging this, or we're going to just run this offline, run this code offline. And a lot of gameplay logic is written with something called like RPC, or there might be some variations of it, but let's go with RPC for now, because that's a common way to send a function or send data over the internet. So an RPC is basically, hey, this client is executing this command. We're going to tell the server that we've executed this command. That server is then going to verify this command, and then if there's permission to do that command, it disperses that command to all the other game clients that are connected, so that command is seen by all clients. So I shoot a gun, I tell the server, hey, I shot a gun. The server says, okay, they shot a gun. I'm going to tell the other people who are connected, this player shot a gun. And then all those clients get the command that the player shot the gun, and then, that's how you synchronize data. That's how you keep like the network synchronized as far as what's going on in the game world for just match to match type stuff. And there's different ways you can have this written, like you can have a client authoritative set configuration. People often call this peer-to-peer, where you have one master game client, and that master game client kind of controls the match. You may have heard, like, there's games where, like, if you are the host, you can, like, execute these, like, hacks that you couldn't otherwise trigger. That's one of the weaknesses of peer-to-peer. Is that basically one player in the match gets to be the server host effectively, and it's verifying that all the things that are being done are valid and can be done. Then there's server authoritative. This is where you have, rather than having one of the players pretending to be, or playing server for everyone, you have a dedicated machine or something that the company hosts that runs the match, and it has absolute control over verifying everything. No player has access to that. Can't really edit the memory or whatever that the server has. And that has the benefit of hackers can't just, happen to be host and then have uncontrolled power, unchecked power. The server is in the company's hands, and unless you go to that company, somehow hack into their physical company server, you can't really change the game or what's going on. Ideally, that server is in a place that the company controls, and the company knows for sure that everything that server is verifying, and everything, it's not being edited or changed in a way that would, negatively impact gameplay. And dedicated servers is how a lot of companies have gone. So rather than peer-to-peer, a lot of companies do dedicated servers for that reason. One con to dedicated servers is that you get a lot more network latency. So now it's like, okay, I shot a gun. You tell the server, hey, I shot a gun. The server says, okay, you shot a gun, but were you allowed to shoot that gun? Let me check the data that I have about you on whether you are allowed to shoot that gun. And if you're allowed to shoot that gun, I'll tell everyone that you shot that gun. And if you're not allowed to shoot that gun based on the data I have, you probably shouldn't be allowed to shoot that gun, and I'm not going to tell everyone you shot that gun because, according to my data, you're wrong. So that's how dedicated servers are. Now, one criticism of Stop Killing Games and having to provide an end-of-life plan is like there's this debate around providing these server binaries for a player to self-host. Once upon a time, like if it's peer-to-peer, that server-side logic is already inside of the game client, and that's peer-to-peer is something that's been used for years before dedicated servers were a thing. So it used to be that the server code, like the code for running a game match, all that logic was always just in the game client. So you could dual LAN or host your own server seamlessly in an older game because of peer-to-peer. In a dedicated server, it's different, right? It's like there's an ecosystem where the company wants to control the data that's going in and going out to other people. And the thought is that, well, by forcing game companies to have to provide a custom server binary, that might force them to infringe their own IP or whatever, yada yada. So let's talk about that, right? So the first example I can think of is Minecraft, where they will let anyone host their own dedicated server. Like you can use Realms, you can like pay Microsoft to do a Minecraft server, yeah, that's an option. But you can also just host your own. If you got a computer that's sitting around, maybe collecting some dust, you can just download the server binaries to host your own Minecraft server. That's fine, doesn't infringe Microsoft's IP, whatever, perfectly fine. So why can't we do this for other games? Why can't we do it for a World of Warcraft or a Final Fantasy XIV or whatever? From like an idealistic point of view. And I would say if these games wanted to, they could let you host your own private server and have no issue with it and not have to, it wouldn't hurt their copyright or intellectual property at all, depending on how they want to go about things. So I don't really buy the argument that like you can't just have the ability for people to host their own servers. But okay, what if I use a server technology that has been licensed out to me? I can't publicly give out the licensing. I can't publicly deliver my binaries because I'm using architecture that cannot be freely given out to people because I bought a proprietary, I'm using a proprietary middleware or whatever. So at end of life, when I have to shut down the game, I can't just provide my server binaries because it contains some middleware that cannot be publicly disclosed. And this isn't talking about like giving out raw source code. This is just like giving out like a server binary that's just like you double click it, it runs, and people connect to your IP address and it just works, yada yada. And in that scenario, the end of life plan might just be, okay, we're shutting down the game. Here's the technologies we used. We use this. If you want to host your own server, you're going to have to get a license for that on your own. If you want to use this technology that we currently use, you're going to have to get a license for that on your own. If you're, list out the technologies you did use and just say, well, hey, here's what we used as middleware. But you're on your own if you want to actually get the licenses for those. So we can't give you a dedicated, easy to use, double click and it runs server binary, but hey, here's what we use. If you want to try and rebuild it, yeah, go ahead, you're on your own, but hey, we told you what we're using. Find the middleware yourself, get your own licenses, and set up your server, figure it out, yada yada. I think that's probably fine. And then also, what else? What else? Or there's even the other last option. Hey, we're ending service. You have until this date, until it's, pulled. And by the way, if you want to try and reverse engineer our game and build your own login server and matchmaking server and yada yada, we won't stop you. But we can't provide you any binaries on our end. But if you want to, build your own server that doesn't, clean room, build your own server that communicates with our client in a way that it understands, then we won't stop you. There's ways to make an end-of-life plan workable, I think. And I think the current discourse I've seen around it has been, well, it's just not possible. It's not possible. Having an end-of-life plan for an online game is putting up too many guardrails and might prevent people from being able to make a online live service game and make it too hard for independents and yada yada. And I don't know. I don't really buy that it adds that much overhead. It's just, there's gonna be back and forth over what's feasible as far as what an end-of-life plan would look like in more detail once if Stop Killing Games succeeds and the EU can look at it and start having these conversations with developers and the consumer. I feel like there's a middle ground. It's not an end all, oh, this is going to destroy online games. There are workable solutions. And honestly, as a network programmer, as someone who's made games with networking, network programming, networked online multiplayer, however many ways you want to say it, I think it might even be a little infantilizing to say that it's just not possible, that me as a network programmer can't figure out how to make it so that an previously online game can work offline. Or even that it's not possible for a community to know how to reverse engineer a game if they love it enough and make it work. So let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, there was a game called Atmosphere. It was a level creation game. In this level creation game, you built your own levels, you shared them with other people, and you uploaded them, right? And people could see what the popular levels, yada yada. If you want a comparison, it's kind of like Roblox or VR chat, where you can make your own custom content. Atmosphere was that style of game. It shut down in 2012. Pretty much quite a few levels that people made over the years were lost permanently. But there was a passionate community that I was a part of that really loved the game. We reverse engineered the game. Made a server for it. We rebuilt the login server from scratch, didn't need any original source code. We got the multiplayer working again. Didn't have to reverse engineer any source code. We just found what happened to be using Photon. It's a middleware for doing online network multiplayer. So we just found the middleware that we needed, that we could host ourselves. We got that working again. And yeah, in the end, we got it working basically one-to-one to how it used to work. And people who used to love the game found it, started uploading their own levels again. Yeah, we lost all the old stuff, and we'll never be able to play a lot of the levels that were lost, unfortunately, you know. But we were able to start a new community around the game that had originally perished and became abandonware. People can now go to atmosphere.com, which was its original domain. I'll get to how that was possible in a moment, but people can play the game still because a passionate group of people, that included me, really loved the game, and we worked to make it work again. We looked at what the game client was asking the server, for, and bit by bit, we just had to make it so that the server gave the responses that the game client wanted to hear until the game client was fully functioning again. That same process can be done with any other game that shuts down. All that has to happen is that people have to know that when they are reverse engineering a game that has been discontinued, that they are not going to get cease and desisted. And overall, that company's not making money on the game anymore. They've basically said, hey, we've decided that we're not supporting this game anymore. We are opting out of making money on this particular game. Not necessarily that we don't want to make money on this IP in the future or on future titles, but this game in particular, we're not supporting it anymore because in our mind, too few people are playing it. But hey, if you want to keep it going for whatever reason, even if there's only like 52 people playing at a given moment, well, hey, we don't really care because we weren't making much money off of it anyway. And then an end-of-life plan could be as simple as that, hey, we've shut down the game. If you want to keep it going, but we're not. You know? And with Atmosphere, years down the line, the original creators of of Atmosphere, and even people who were former management, found out about it. We're very grateful, actually, that the Revival project existed and that their work was being preserved. And many years down the line, some strings were pulled. I don't know what strings were pulled, but they actually, at some point, eventually gave us the raw game code for Atmosphere. Which, that was a surprise. We weren't expecting it, and honestly not something that needs to even be done or accomplished by something like Stop Killing Games. Ideally, I don't think most developers want to give away their source code, but the company and everything, I think, was no longer producing anything anymore, and they're like, hey, you know what? We just care about this being preserved. They gave us the source code. And now we can actually make new content with Atmosphere if we really wanted. The only real stipulation is that we don't make a profit. We don't sell for money. We don't make money. You just kind of run it for free for the people who want to play it whenever they are like, hey, I remember this game. I want to play it. See what it was about. And it's been preserved that way. And honestly, I think like the bare minimum for like an end-of-life plan, like Stop Killing Games aiming like for a situation where you can still interact with the game to a reasonable degree. And I think my reasonable degree of something that works is maybe you don't even have to recreate the gameplay one-to-one or everything. It just has to be, it could be as simple as, hey, let's say like Final Fantasy XIV shut down one day for whatever reason. It could be as simple as, hey, I can open up the client and I can walk around all the maps. And maybe I get logged into some generic local account that doesn't connect to a server. It connects offline and yada yada. And maybe the last criticism maybe of Stop Killing Games that I've heard is like developers might have to retroactively go and make the online game a single player experience and rebalance everything and yada yada. Stop Killing Games isn't asking for that, but games like Final Fantasy XIV, for example, have been making a big push to make it so you can play a lot of content solo. So, hypothetically, you could get to the entire main, like the entire MSQ of Final Fantasy XIV completely offline, so long as there is a system to facilitate that trust system offline. Because you're already playing by yourself anyway, how many more hoops is it to jump down to make it so that that system works without being connected to a Square Enix server? And some things are as simple as just changing, okay, when the client makes a call to the server to save the current player state, whatever level they are, yada yada yada, maybe instead of calling the server, it writes to an offline file. And that might be like a week to change. Maybe. Or maybe worst case, a month. You just rewrite the endpoints to redirect to somewhere else, and then, hey, it works offline now. And in Final Fantasy XIV's case, that might be a workable solution because it's, for all intents and purposes, outside of maybe some like all the side content, the main story scenario is mostly a single player style experience, aside from like the dungeons, which again can be played with a trust system, which doesn't require other players. So again, some amount of that game could be preserved in an offline scenario. So, what are my thoughts on this as like a consumer? I've spoken on this like kind of as a developer and solutions I could come up with as a developer. But what about as a consumer? And I'll be honest, I have not been buying a lot of online only games. Final Fantasy XIV might be the one exception. But most games, they don't respect my time, they don't respect my money. I don't buy them. They could shut down at any moment, and money's tight in this day and age. Game prices keep going up higher when the amount of money that can be brought in keeps going down. Game companies, I think, need to respect their money more. So, yeah, I'm in agreement that there should be an end-of-life plan for any game that comes out. For indie projects, an end-of-life plan is going to affect them a lot less, I think. It's a lot easier for an indie-scoped project to go offline and run as an offline project. And for big companies, well, most companies are either too big to fail, or if they're going to decide to shut down a game and they can't like put in like $1,000 to like pay someone to just redirect the calls that connect to an online service to say, hey, instead of connecting to the online service, just connect offline. I don't know. Skill issue. So yeah, that's everything I got to say. And yeah. I'll see you guys next time.